On July 14, 1974, a man wearing a plaster arm sling walks through a crowded state park in broad daylight and asks for help loading a sailboat. He introduces himself to multiple women as Ted. He drives a tan 1968 Volkswagen Beetle. Within a 4-hour window, 2 young women vanish from that exact park. Police quickly compile a composite sketch. They have the suspect's first name, his physical description, and the exact make, model, and color of his car. Several people close to the man, including his girlfriend and a former police officer he works with at a suicide crisis center, call investigators to report that he is a perfect match. Therefore, a clean arrest should have followed immediately. But detectives dismiss the tips. The suspect is a psychology graduate who works for the Washington State Republican Party and attends law school. He simply doesn't fit the profile of a violent predator. Because authorities refuse to look at the clean-cut political aid hiding in plain sight, he is free to modify his vehicle. He removes the front passenger seat entirely, ensuring the next women he asks for help will never be seen again. How did this law student manage to dismantle the lives of dozens of women, manipulate the American justice system, and walk right out of 2 different jailhouses? The answer lies in his understanding of human empathy and his absolute lack of it. The disappearances begin quietly in the winter of 1974 in Washington state.
On February 1st, 21-year-old Lynda Ann Healy goes to sleep in her basement apartment in Seattle.
She is a university undergraduate who broadcasts morning radio weather reports for skiers. But the next morning, she does not show up for work. Her room is neat, her bed carefully made, but there is blood on her pillow. She is gone. A month later, Donna Gail Manson vanishes on her way to a campus jazz concert. Then Susan Rancourt disappears in Ellensburg. Then Roberta Parks in Corvallis. The police have no physical evidence, but they recognize a pattern. The victims are all young, attractive, white college students. They disappear at night. And almost all of them wear their hair long, parted down the middle. Witnesses soon report a pattern of their own. Women stepping out of libraries or walking across campus parking lots are approached by an attractive man in distress. He wears a sling on his arm or a heavy plaster cast on his leg. He hobbles on crutches. He drops a stack of books and asks for help carrying them to his car. The car is always a tan Volkswagen Beetle. He exploits their natural instinct to assist someone who is hurt. Once they lean into the vehicle to set down his books, he pulls a crowbar from behind the driver's seat and strikes them over the head. He handcuffs their unconscious bodies and shoves them into the empty space on the floorboard where the passenger seat used to be. Therefore, the victims remain entirely invisible to passing motorists as he drives away.
By late summer, the Pacific Northwest is paralyzed by fear.
Hitchhiking drops sharply. Women walk in groups. But the killer simply changes his approach. This leads to the July 14th abductions at Lake Sammamish State Park, where Janice and OTT and Denise Marie Nasland are taken in broad daylight, right out of a crowd of thousands. On September 6th, 2 grouse hunters hike near a service road in Issaquah, 2 miles from the state park. They discover the skeletal remains of OTT and Nasland. 6 months later, forestry students walk through the woods on Taylor Mountain, a popular hiking area just east of Issaquah. They find the skulls of Lynda Ann Healy, Susan Rancourt, and Roberta Parks. Investigators from Seattle and King County are overwhelmed by an avalanche of data. They receive up to 200 tips every single day. To manage the chaos, they borrow the King County payroll computer, a primitive machine by the standards of the time, and feed it massive lists of names. They input registered owners of Volkswagens. They input known offenders. They input men named Ted. The computer spits out 26 names that overlap across the lists. One of those names is Theodore Robert Bundy. Who is Theodore Robert Bundy? He was born in a home for unwed mothers in Vermont. To avoid social stigma in the 1940s, he was raised in Philadelphia believing his grandparents were his actual parents and his biological mother was his older sister. When he finally discovered his true birth certificate in 1969, the deception fractured his reality.
He developed a deep resentment toward his mother and an intense need for control.
This need for control shattered when a wealthy university classmate named Stephanie Brooks ended their relationship. She had long, dark hair, parted in the middle. She thought Bundy lacked ambition and professional promise. Devastated and obsessed, Bundy dropped out of school and spent years reinventing himself. He became an honors student. He embedded himself in politics. He manipulated Brooks into falling in love with him again, discussing marriage, just so he could abruptly cut off all contact and reject her. He proved he could dominate her. But it wasn't enough. Every woman he targets going forward fits her physical description. Bundy is 27 years old. He graduated with distinction from the University of Washington with a degree in psychology. He wrote a pamphlet on rape prevention for the Seattle Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. He works at the Department of Emergency Services, the exact state agency tasked with coordinating the search and rescue efforts for the missing women. This administrative infiltration allows him to monitor the police hunt from the inside. When his girlfriend Elizabeth Klopfer sees the composite sketch, she calls the police. She tells them Bundy drives a tan Volkswagen and that she recently found a bag of plaster of Paris, crutches, and a meat cleaver in his apartment. A former police officer named Enrule, who sits next to Bundy at a suicide hotline, also calls in the tip. But the detectives look at Bundy's resume. They look at his tailored suits and his ties to the governor's office. They conclude that a man with this level of social legitimacy cannot be a predator. In August 1974, Bundy receives an acceptance letter from the University of Utah School of Law. He packs up his modified Volkswagen and moves to Salt Lake City. Therefore, the murders in Washington suddenly stop. But the lack of communication between state police departments in the 1970s means Bundy simply carries his methodology into a fresh, unsuspecting jurisdiction. In Utah, his violence escalates. On October 18th, the 17-year-old daughter of a local police chief disappears after leaving a pizza parlor. Her name is Melissa Smith. 9 days later, her nude and battered body is found in a mountainous area. On Halloween night, 17-year-old Laura Ann Healy vanishes in Leahy, Utah. Bundy no longer just kills and discards. He transports his victims back to his apartment. He washes their hair. He applies makeup to their lifeless faces. He returns to the bodies multiple times, engaging in rituals until the remains are too decayed to interact with. He tells investigators years later that murder is not just a crime of lust, but a matter of possession. But his absolute confidence leads to a critical mistake.
On November 8th, 1974, Bundy prowls the parking lot of the Fashion Place Mall in Murray, Utah.
He approaches 18-year-old Carol D'Aronch. He does not use his fake injury routine. Instead, he wears a suit and identifies himself as Officer Roseland. He tells D'Aranch someone tried to break into her car, and he needs her to come to the police station to file a report. She gets into his Volkswagen. Bundy pulls onto a dark road that does not lead to the station. When D'Aranch questions the route, Bundy slams on the brakes. He pulls a handgun and a pair of handcuffs. But as they struggle in the cramped front seat, Bundy makes an error. He snaps both handcuffs onto her left wrist. Because her right hand is free, D'Aranch fights back fiercely. She manages to rip the door handle, throw herself out of the car, and run into oncoming traffic. A passing driver spots her and pulls over. D'Aranch survives. And now, the police have a living witness. Bundy is enraged that his trap failed. Therefore, he does not go into hiding. That exact same evening, he drives 20 miles north to Viewmorn High School in Bountiful, Utah. A school play is underway. Bundy paces the back of the auditorium. He asks a teacher and a student to come out to the parking lot to identify a car, but they refuse. 17-year-old Deborah Jean Kent leaves the play early to pick up her younger brother.
She never makes it to her car.
When police search the high school parking lot the next morning, they do not find Deborah. But they do find a small, metal key lying on the asphalt. It perfectly unlocks the handcuffs dangling from Carol D'Aranch's wrist. The authorities now have a description of a fake police officer, a tan Volkswagen, and a matching handcuff key. They begin to close the net around Salt Lake City. But Bundy is already looking at a map, plotting his next hunting ground in the snow-covered mountains of Colorado. The Rocky Mountains offer a sprawling, isolated hunting ground. On January 12, 1975, 23-year-old nurse Karen Campbell leaves her fiancé in the lobby of the Wildwood Inn in Snowmass Village, Colorado. She walks down a well-lit hallway to retrieve a magazine from their room. She never returns. A month later, her nude body is found next to a dirt road just outside the resort. Her skull features distinctive linear depressions from a blunt instrument, and her body bears deep cuts from a sharp weapon. 2 months later, ski instructor Julie Cunningham steps out of her apartment in Vail to meet a friend for dinner. A handsome man on crutches approaches her. He asks for help carrying his ski boots to his car. She agrees. He clubs her, handcuffs her, and drives her 90 miles west to Rifle, Colorado. Weeks later, he makes the 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City just to revisit her remains. In April, 24-year-old Denise Oliverson rides her bicycle toward her parents' house in Grand Junction. Police find only her bicycle and sandals under a railroad viaduct.
In May, Bundy parks outside a junior high school in Pocatello, Idaho.
He lures 12-year-old Lynette Culver into his vehicle, drives her to his hotel room, and drowns in January 1975. The hunting ground shifts. 28-year-old Theodore Robert Bundy treats the interstate highway system as his private reserve. On January 12th, 23-year-old registered nurse Karen Campbell leaves the lobby of her hotel in Snowmass Village, Colorado, to retrieve a magazine from her room. She never makes it down the brightly lit hallway. A month later, her body is found in a snowbank just outside the resort. The medical examiner notes deep linear fractures on her skull from a blunt instrument. The violence accelerates through the spring. On March 15th, 26-year-old ski instructor Julie Cunningham vanishes from Vail, Colorado. On April 6th, Denise Oliverson disappears while riding her bicycle in Grand Junction. On May 6, Bundy drives north to Pocatello, Idaho, and abducts a 12-year-old girl from a junior high school playground. Investigators in Washington, Utah, and Colorado are drowning in data. In November 1975, 30 detectives and prosecutors from 5 states converge in a ski town to compare notes. They call it the Aspen Summit. They align timelines, gas receipts, and witness statements. They realize they are all tracking the exact same phantom. Therefore, they agree to pool their resources. But police need physical evidence to make an arrest. And Bundy is a meticulous researcher. He leaves no fingerprints. He burns his victims' clothing to ensure no trace evidence ties him to the crimes.
How does a highly organized predator finally get caught?
Not by a brilliant forensic breakthrough, but by a routine traffic patrol. On August 16, 1975, Utah Highway Patrol Sergeant Bob Hayward sits in his cruiser in the Salt Lake City suburb of Granger. In the pre-dawn darkness, a tan 1968 Volkswagen Beetle cruises the residential area with its headlights switched off. When the driver spots the patrol car, he speeds away. Hayward gives chase and pulls the vehicle over. The driver is clean-cut, wearing a turtleneck sweater to hide a dark mole on his neck. He hands over his license. Theodore Robert Bundy. Hayward shines his flashlight into the interior. He notices the front passenger seat is completely missing. It has been removed and shoved into the back. Hayward searches the vehicle. He finds a crowbar, a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and a pair of handcuffs. Bundy claims the mask is for skiing and he found the handcuffs in a dumpster. It is a weak excuse, but possessing suspicious tools is only a misdemeanor. Authorities arrest him for evading an officer, but without a body or a confession, they are forced to let him go. Bundy knows the police are watching him now. He is placed under 24-hour surveillance. Therefore, he thoroughly scrubs the interior of his Volkswagen and sells it to a teenager in Midvale, Utah. He believes he has erased his tracks. He is wrong.
Utah police track down the teenager and immediately impound the vehicle.
Inside the FBI laboratory, technicians dismantle the car piece by piece. They find hairs behind the backseat area. Microscopic analysis confirms the hairs match Karen Campbell, Carol D'Aronch, and Melissa Smith. FBI specialists conclude that finding hair from 3 different women who never met inside a single vehicle is a mathematical improbability. On October 2nd, detectives place Bundy in a physical police lineup. Carol D'Aronch stares through the one-way glass. She points directly at him. He is the man who posed as
Officer Roseland
and tried to handcuff her at the mall. Bundy is charged with aggravated kidnapping. He goes to trial in February 1976. Arrogant and confident in his ability to manipulate the system, he waives his right to a jury trial. He assumes a judge will never convict a well-dressed, educated law student. But Judge Stuart Hansen Jr. sees right through the facade, later noting Bundy's chameleon-like ability to change his appearance from day to day. Bundy is found guilty and sentenced to 1 to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. For the families of the missing women, it feels like a victory. The net has closed. But a sociopather's need for control does not vanish behind steel bars. While Bundy sits in a Utah prison, the FBI's behavioral science unit in Quantico is studying his shadow. Pioneers like Robert Ressler are developing a new system to classify murderers. They define killers as either disorganized or organized.
Bundy is the ultimate organized killer.
He is highly intelligent, socially competent, and meticulous. He maintains an outwardly normal lifestyle to neutralize suspicion. But his absolute narcissism means he refuses to accept guilt. He blames his victims for radiating vulnerability. He blames the media. He blames everyone but himself. In October 1976, Colorado authorities officially charged Bundy with the murder of Karen Campbell. In January 1977, he waives extradition and is transported to the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado. Here, Bundy makes a calculated legal maneuver that exposes a massive vulnerability in the American judicial system. He demands the right to serve as his own attorney. The judge grants the request. As his own legal counsel, Bundy argues that wearing leg shackles and handcuffs impairs his ability to review documents and present a dignified defense. The judge agrees. He is allowed to move about the courtroom completely unrestrained. On June 7, 1977, the court takes a recess. Bundy asks to visit the courthouse law library to research his case. A lone guard is stationed outside the door. Once alone, Bundy steps behind a tall wooden bookcase. He opens a second-story window. He jumps. He lands hard on the grass below, severely spraining his right ankle. But he ignores the pain, sheds an outer layer of courtroom clothing, and walks right through the streets of Aspen.
By the time police realize the room is empty and set up roadblocks on the highways, Bundy is already hiking up Aspen Mountain.
He breaks into a hunting cabin near the summit, stealing food, clothing, and a rifle. For 3 days, he wanders the mountain forests, trying to navigate south toward the town of Crested Butte. But the terrain confuses him. Cold, exhausted, sleep-deprived, and limping heavily, he breaks into a camping trailer at Maroon Lake to steal a ski parker. After 6 days on the run, his survival instincts falter. Instead of heading deeper into the wilderness, he walks right back toward Aspen. He steals a car at the edge of a golf course and attempts to drive away. 2 police officers spot the vehicle weaving erratically across the center line. They pull the car over and find the fugitive behind the wheel. Inside the car are maps of the mountain area prosecutors were using to demonstrate the location of Karen Campbell's body. His escape was entirely planned. Bundy is sent to a more secure facility at the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs. Authorities assume he has learned his lesson. But Bundy does not accept defeat. He immediately begins plotting his next move. He secures a detailed floor plan of the jail. Through visitors, including a woman named Carol Ann Boone who works at the Washington State Department of Emergency Services, he smuggles in $500 in cash and a hacksaw blade. Bundy identifies a structural flaw in his cell. The ceiling light fixture is unreinforced. Over several weeks, he patiently soars through the metal framework while the other inmates take their evening showers.
Because the hole is incredibly small, just 1 square foot, he stops eating.
He sheds 35 pounds from his already lean frame. On December 30th, 1977, the jail operates on a skeleton crew for the Christmas holiday. Night falls. Bundy gathers his heavy legal files and books. He arranges them on his mattress and pulls the blanket up, creating the perfect silhouette of a sleeping man. He climbs up the wall, contorts his starving body, and squeezes through the 1-foot hole into the dark ceiling ductwork. He crawls through the crawlspace until he reaches the ceiling above the chief jailer's private apartment. The jailer and his wife are out for the evening. Bundy drops down into the apartment. He opens the man's closet, selects a fresh set of civilian street clothes, puts them on, and simply walks out the front door of the jail. He hotwires a car, but it breaks down on Interstate 70 in the freezing mountains. A passing motorist pulls over and offers the stranded stranger a ride to Vail. From there, Bundy boards a bus to Denver and catches a morning flight to Chicago. Back in Glenwood Springs, the guards glance into his cell. They see the shape under the blanket. They do not realize the prisoner is missing until noon the next day. By the time the alarm sounds, 17 hours have passed. The bird has flown the cage. Where does a hunted man go to vanish?
He takes a train from Chicago to Ann Arbor, Michigan.
He steals a car and drives south to Atlanta. He climbs onto a bus. On the morning of January 8th, 1978, Theodore Robert Bundy steps off a bus in Tallahassee, Florida. He rents a room in a boarding house near the Florida State University campus under the fake name Chris Hagen. At first, he attempts to find legitimate work at a construction site, but the foreman asks for identification, which he cannot provide. Therefore, he abandons the idea of a normal life. He reverts to his old habits. He shoplifts food. He steals credit cards from women's wallets left unattended in grocery carts. The Pacific Northwest is behind him. The snows of Utah and Colorado are thousands of miles away. But the psychological urge to possess and destroy has followed him across the country. And in Florida, with no money, no vehicle, and the entire FBI searching for him, his meticulous control is about to fracture. If you want the next real case drawn the same way, subscribe to Criminally Drawn. I'm John T. Thank you for watching.